Okay, welcome everyone to our application narrative training. We are going to talk about a few things today. Actually, I don't know why I just redo the agenda, and we actually aren't going to be reviewing the project because most of you have been in this for weeks now and you already know about it. But I did want to have a time for submission feedback since that was on Tuesday. And I think everyone who's on submitted something, which is awesome. And so we just wanted to know how that went and your recommendations. I can already think of a few, but I also don't know what you all are going through. And then we're going to go through the narrative portion and then our keynotes. So let me go back to this. Okay, so this is what I'm doing here. So you guys can either go ahead and put something in the chat. If you want to unmute yourself, that's fine too. But right now it would be great to take a minute or two to just, or more if we need to, on submission feedback. If you don't want to do it directly, you want to do it more anonymously, you could go ahead and submit something via forms or on our HOME-ARP email address. That's fine too. But we really want to know how it went for you. I know some of you had a hard time if your files were too big. We did get one link to a SharePoint site because they had way too much information. And I know we had several that were split up because the one file would have been too big. So was there something that we could have done better for next time and what that looks like? Just getting your thoughts on the submission piece. Gonna wait 30 seconds.
Hi, this is Yvonne Pryor.
Hi, Yvonne.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I've had better days, I tell you. During the feedback, that was not my finest hour in the submittal.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, perhaps I missed some of it, but I think that when it came to loading the individual documents on the front side into the file, I didn't catch that initially.
Okay.
And so I was kind of, what stuck in my head was that if we had PDFs and that kind of thing. So I probably made you all's life miserable if you have started to look at that after I submitted it. I said, oh my God. So just going, I guess perhaps it was just me. I just missed it. That portion of it. And then when I realized how it should have gone, it was already after 7 o'clock that evening.
Yeah.
So, but I had to get something in. And then of course, after the fact, you question everything. Did I remember to submit this? Did I remember to submit that? And there was a lot of stuff that needed to go in there. So have mercy on the people in Bullock County if in the consideration. And don't cause them to pay because Yvonne had a bad moment. Okay. Thank you.
Hilarious. You're welcome. So, okay, so just to be clear, and Yvonne, I may ask you to reply to this because one of the things that we really tried to do is have, that's why we're doing the trainings to make sure that, we were kind of up to, kind of making sure everything was going along. So as I understand it, so just please let me know if I'm saying this wrong. So from what you just said, was it just that the trainings were too long? And so you needed more of a checklist that was easier to go through? I guess what would have made it easier for you to submit, considering you looked at it and were like, oh, that's what they meant, and then you had to go back and do it? What could we have done to make that, and I'll call you in a second, Doug, what could we have done to have made that easier for you going in so you felt more prepared?
I'm actually more of a visual person.
Okay.
Having it outlined, unfortunately, I'll sound like a novice, but a step by step, with
okay.
I'm visual, and I can hear and listen to it time and time again. But if I don't see it, for whatever reason, it doesn't register, or it doesn't register as quick.
Did you look at the submission video that I put on the website?
I went back and looked at every one of them, especially when I began to work on it. I went back and looked at it, but my hearing it, and then, I saw where you would have it on the screen and you would go from step to step with it. But I am more of a, let's do it, if you will, chronologically.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. So, okay. That just helps us know that we just have to look at multiple learning options. And for those of you who don't know, and it sounds like that's what you're referring to, Yvonne. Is it Yvonne or Yvonne?
You can call me what you want, as long as you consider us.
That's hilarious.
It's Yvonne.
So,
Sorry.
you said it's what?
Yvonne.
Yvonne. Okay.
Yeah.
So what Yvonne was saying was, okay, so what I did was I did a separate submission video. I actually re-recorded it later that night. And it ended up being like 20-25 minutes long to go through step by step. And so how I understand what Yvonne was saying was that it needed basically going through the whole thing like you were going through an actual training. So maybe next time for this next submission at the one beforehand, what I'll do is I'll ask y'all to actually bring all of your information and we will load up all the parts of all the 4 groups. And you guys could essentially just follow along with the training. So is that something that you would need, Yvonne?
I think so, but I
Okay.
got you. I got it now after I felt so bad. I didn't even sleep that night.
Oh.
Knowing that, what I mean, there's information there, but it's not like it's not easy. It's not user friendly,
Okay.
So, but I think I've got it now. So
Okay.
Go forward. But in the event that somebody else feels like I feel about it being visual, then
Okay.
yes to that training.
Okay, cool beans. Okay, thanks for your thoughts. Doug, you're up. You can just go ahead and unmute.
Hey, so I will say amen to Yvonne and say that it wasn't so much like I thought the step-by-step stuff was really good. And I really enjoyed the checklist. I wish that I had gone through that submission checklist way before I did.
Gotcha.
So I was in the Excel spreadsheets and I was making sure that I went through the tabs and then was going to go back through that submission checklist. And I should have started with that submission checklist because it was the day of that I started looking at that and going, oh my gosh, we need this and that. And there's other stuff outside of the
Excel spreadsheet
of the spreadsheet that I need to submit. And that was really it was super helpful when I started looking at those. I just wish I had started looking at those earlier than when I did.
Gotcha.
And then there were a few places specifically with the program budget that I got confused between the current programs that we run and what we're getting ready to ask for. Does that make sense? Yeah. So there was like a monthly and an annual, and I was like, well, do I need to have both columns filled out, or if there's annual things, is that all? And hopefully the attached documents that the other submitted documents like our budget and financials helps to answer those questions more completely. Gotcha. But I did get lost in that section about, is this the project budget? Or is this is this our program budget for the organization? Right. And so I might have given you what you didn't ask for, but that was the only part where I got a little bit confused, is where it said project budget, but then the questions in the spreadsheet seemed to be asking for our operational budget as an organization. Yeah. And so that was the only place that I got a little bit confused and worked my way through it. But I really did enjoy the submission checklists with each spreadsheet were really helpful. They're really helpful if you look at them way before the day of submission. Yeah.
Right. So and that's, so I was thinking, okay, so the way that you all were putting it together was different than what I was thinking, because I was thinking, okay, we're doing all these different steps and then you just package it. Well, it would have been good to know how to package it ahead of time so you knew what to gather while we were going along. So that makes total sense. So that was my fault. I'm so sorry. I wasn't thinking in that direction. So no, but that's really good. So so do earlier to know what is needed. So that's perfect. And with the budget, it was kind of a both and type of situation. It wasn't an either or. Essentially, with all of the information, and this is for everyone, when we're looking at it, we're just wanting to know if your organization has the capacity to take up another program of this magnitude, because we can't pay for those operating expenses. And if it can't, if anything can be done in order to help support that. So what needs to be plugged in, and or any capacity building, because we do have the opportunity to also kind of add on some capacity building pieces outside of what we're doing here. So we're kind of, thankfully, this is a demonstration project. So the whole purpose of all of this is for us to have these conversations, for us to gather the information, hopefully for you guys to take this and use it moving forward with other grants. But we also recognize that this probably won't be like other grants that you apply to either. It's a little bit of both. But at least, hopefully, you have in your arsenal just ways to help build into those grants too, in order to keep all your programs running and add new programs and build that capacity so you can help more people. So, okay, so that's perfect. So for the program budget, it was kind of, we wanted, again, and so I just stated that, knowing what you were doing now and how it would basically transition to an additional program with the non-congregate shelter. So that's what we were looking for. And it sounds like that's kind of what you did too. So that's great. Okay, any other questions? I know we had a few other people come on. We're talking about the submission feedback and the process. Okay, good. And honestly, Doug, so Doug wrote, this template will be super useful in the future for all kinds of other projects. And that's exactly what our intention was so then that way you could essentially create a storehouse for all of your information, all of your grants, what those grants do, how you spent it, essentially creating your own tracking sheet that you could even manipulate in the future to what you need. And then you can use that for future grants. So that was the whole purpose of all the Excel spreadsheets. Okay, Teresa, you're up.
Well, hello, everyone. I found it a little challenging for me because I did not know how to zip and couldn't figure it out. So I had to make a special trip to meet someone in the office to assist with that particular process. And then we ran into internet transmission problems because the files were too large. Yeah. And we couldn't figure out, how to do that. So it was decided that the person that knew how to zip would get all of the information and just go home and send the file. And I think you ended up with double files because I had some of the stuff on mine. And by the time I got back home, which was after 11:30, I think when I put my computer together and it connected with my home internet, I think some files must have transmitted. Okay. So, so the size of the files were, a little difficult. Then we had to figure out how we could get you all of the information, and that ended up being a lot more emails than we had planned to send. Okay,
that's good to know. So for the zip piece, did you? This is just for information. Did you happen to watch one of the trainings that I did on the submission process?
Yes, I did, but I'm not a real tech person. So,
okay.
Yeah,
I get it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so for me, trying to figure it out, it wasn't working. And I know I have a younger staff person that is more tech savvy to me. And I texted her and said, I'm running into these issues. Can you meet me after your group? Because she has group until 8:30. Yeah. And so that's, that's what happened and everything. So people who have that experience, I mean, I can type, yes. But when it comes to all these other fancy things, I'm left out. I usually cannot figure it out.
Okay, well, no, and the reason that I asked that is because I knew the zip process may be a little foreign to some people. And so I tried extra hard to make sure that we did the step-by-step pieces. So that just helps me know that we need, and I didn't, and it's a weird balance because some people are super knowledgeable and other people aren't. And so making sure that you put just enough information for both, that it's not, too much for some and too little for others. So so that's good to know. Then what I'll do is we'll create a better checklist with more specifics. So
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your feedback. That's good to know. Good to know. Okay. And that actually gives me a lot of good insight for the next submission. Okay. Well, is there anyone else who wants to go ahead and give us any other feedback? Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're going to move on to the next thing. So we're going to start in on the training. This really is probably going to be the quickest and easiest because really this is the place where you guys write out your story. Now, the reason why we did it we did the trainings the way that we did. We started with the operation budget. Well, actually, we started with the data piece, so that way you knew kind of your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats, looking at the data that you have for your area and supporting all the work that you do through the numbers, then looking at your operations budget, so where the capacity of your agency is, then moving into the actual development and what you want to do. So we've tried to be really strategic with this. Because now moving into the staff that we did last week and talking about who is going to be working on the program and what their background is and if they can sustain the work. And then now going into the narrative. So this is essentially taking all the information that you've really collectively put together over the last few weeks, and now you get to write it out. Okay, so I don't think this is going to take super long. I'm going to kind of briefly go over what we're looking for in each of these sections, so then that way you can go ahead and take it back with you, so going forward kind of where you need to start your story. But this is essentially for you to express everything that you want to do. So the first required documentation. So to go back to what Doug was talking about. So Doug, when you're doing the submissions in the extra file, and everyone, it's not just Doug, everyone, you're going to want to put in your operating policies and procedures for your non-congregate shelter. Now, it's okay if you go ahead and add it to your current policies and procedures. You just create an additional draft of that, and you just, and call it 2023, and adding in the NCS operating policies and procedures to your current system that you have and what you propose. You can even go through it and highlight different areas of your policies and procedures that are really relevant. Again, if you look at, and let me see if I can pull it up here. If you look at the file, I didn't think we were going to do this, so there we go. Shoot. So if you look at the whole non-congregate shelter file in the packet that you downloaded, what you're going to want to do, so let's look at this real quick. So in here is your overview document. So this includes the manual for your application. So this is the non-congregate shelter application manual, and it looks like this. It's what DCA, what we all put together for the NOFA, but also in the packet under file 9 are the relevant materials. And this includes the HUD notice, the 2110 CPD notice. This goes through everything that Kelly and Jody and myself look at when we're seeing what we can and can't do with the non-congregate shelter, okay? It's totally okay and even encouraged for you to reference this if you want to go ahead and, use this in the future. So, I mean, I mean, obviously not use it in the future. I stated that incorrectly. So this is really great if you want to include all these pieces in your policies and procedures. Okay, so so this is okay. So moving forward, as far as, you know, including this, that's what you downloaded. The coordinated entry policies and procedures are already there too, so that can be easily added to your policies and procedures as well, because we are asking for everyone to participate in the coordinated entry system as well as Housing First, and that's all a part of this. And low barrier, you can see it even talks about HMIS, low barrier, and Housing First orientation. Okay. This is the HOME-ARP policy brief as far as our preferences, methods of prioritization, and limitations. And this is a second policy brief. Okay. So, and this is regarding relocation. So if you happen to have people living there, this is the steps you have to take for the Uniform Relocation Act. Okay. So those are all the different things. I would recommend you taking a look at that when you're looking at the narrative, because we are going to have you talk about Housing First. We are going to have you talk about what you're doing in all of those different particular sections, as far as your policies and procedures and how it relates to the non-congregate shelter. Organizational chart, brief job descriptions, and your written personnel policy. So all of this, hopefully this isn't too heavy a lift. You should already have it. And basically what you'd want to do is put in the file the updated version for if you're, you know, allocated non-congregate shelter funds. So that's just the basic thing that you're going to want to do. So hopefully it's just a little bit of admin, including that piece, and it won't be too heavy of a lift because you already have most of this information there, especially like the job descriptions. If your case manager is going to do the same thing for non-congregate shelter as they're doing for your other programs, then you just add non-congregate shelter case management to the list of things that person does. Okay, so there you go. Okay. So, oh wow, that's a lot bigger on the screen than I anticipated. So the first thing is describe your project service area and include the list of all cities, towns, counties, and tribal jurisdictions that will be served by the project. Now, this is really important, especially for those of you who are in a participating jurisdiction or PJ. And Yvonne, I just saw your hand go up, so just give me a second. Let me talk through this first. If you guys are in a place like, I know we had submissions from Atlanta, we had submissions from Athens, those are all participating jurisdictions. We're really going to want to see who you're helping even outside of your areas. So the location of your non-congregate shelter may be in a participating jurisdiction, but we want to know all the counties that you're serving, okay? So I know that there's some of you who have some, assistance to people who are going, victims of violence and those situations. And so oftentimes your service area is huge. So take a look at who has checked into your program and, look at your data files and show us that there is, a lot of people from, all these different counties that you're serving. And this is the history of who we've served in the state of Georgia. Okay, Yvonne, go ahead, unmute yourself.
On the former screen, timeline and Excel spreadsheet. What are you looking for there?
So actually looking at that, timeline should probably have been deleted because there was a timeline at one time and there isn't anymore. And so this goes to everyone who's listening to this afterwards too. The narrative, so we're going to go through the narrative. Here, let me pull it up here. Hold on a second. So on your Excel spreadsheet, you have the list of, where did I put that? So on the Excel spreadsheet, we're going through all the questions on that. And so there was an extra tab that said timeline and we took it out. So that was actually an administrative mistake on my behalf, on my part. So the rest is the Excel spreadsheet that we had talked about before, that you did for all the other submissions.
Okay.
It's just like that. And I'm going to show it to you. I have it right here. So does that answer your question, or did I just make things more confusing?
No, if you're going to show me what you're saying, I'm telling you,
You'll be okay. You're like, just show me. I got to see it to believe it. Okay, I'm pulling it up for you right now. So just give me a second here. Here we go. Okay. So you guys did this for all the others. So it says program description. And so this is I'm just repeating what on the PowerPoint, what it says here. I just basically copied and pasted it. So we can go through here though, if you want. So just, okay. So here's a submission checklist, and there is no timeline. And then the program description, describe the project area and the list of cities, towns, and counties. So I just explained the reason for that. The next section is describe the factors that have contributed to the need for the project, including the number of sheltered persons in the most recent point in time count and McKinney-Vento count. So looking at your data that you guys did for the first section, this is showing why you're serving all these different areas. So looking at the data from the county you're working in, as well as even the surrounding counties that you have, just checking back and mentioning those data points in this section, okay? Again, to back up what y'all are doing, because we all know you guys are seeing the numbers in person. So we just data is an important thing. We have to do that. Data informed design essentially is what we're doing. So shelter operations. So this just goes through how your shelter is going to operate. Now, if any of these things don't apply to you, just put NA, just put N/A. And like, so it's not applicable. We're not doing this. So what basic necessities? So for some of you, you may just go ahead and have the extra shelter. They may have kitchenettes in their area. And so pretty much it is out of your hands to feed the individuals who are in your shelter. That it's, but you may be supplying a whole sort of, fruits and vegetables for them to access, because some of them may not have money. So you need to think about all of the different processes. So there's a really good chance that you will be supplying a lot of these things. So just pretty much expressing how you're going to do it. So if there's a main kitchen area, will they all be eating there and, have dinner from 5 to 7 every night, and lunch from 12 to 2, and those kinds of things. How will they access food and meals? So this just goes through how individuals are going to be fed. We're staying in your non-congregate shelter. And then also the basic pieces, like how are they going to get food and toiletries and things like that. And then you can also talk about how you're going to fund that. So you can talk about your partnerships maybe with other agencies and programs. If you have a lot of nonprofits have programs with some of Panera Bread and things like that, where they get seconds. I know a homeless group I used to work 4 years ago, we would get Starbucks food every other day from all of their, day-old, 2-day-old bread and stuff like that, which was kind of bad for all of us, but we had a lot of sweets around. But it's those types of things. So what kind of partnerships you have and the relationships you've built. Doug, I saw you go off mute. Do you have a question?
Nope, my bad.
Okay, no, it's fine. I just want to make sure that I was recognizing you if that was the situation. Okay, so go ahead and tell us just all the different bits and pieces of the shelter operations. Then moving into your shelter programming. So describe the program strategies and collaborations, your resources. Describe any legal, physical, or programmatic or fiscal concerns not identified elsewhere. So this would be like primarily, like I said, we had a few applications that came in from groups that work with people who are victims of violence. And so if there's some legal and physical area issues, so obviously making sure that you have a remote location that's not accessible by the public, you know, those kinds of things are things to address. If there's other situations that you guys face in your programming, so sometimes if there is a concern around, oh gosh, it could vary. So let's try a fiscal concern. So one of them would be is if maybe a grant doesn't come through. And it's not always fun to talk about that stuff, but it's a very real possibility, you know, with all the changing that happens at HUD and things like that. And so talking about, you know, the fiscal concerns that we have as far as if we're not able to pay for shelter operations, you know, that could be a very real thing. And then, you know, the opportunities that you're looking at in other places. So we're thinking of doing this in case that happens or that. So it's essentially helping you kind of think out all of your potential threats. So if you look at your SWOT analysis and you look at the threats to a non-congregate shelter for you, you know, just kind of thinking through how you would turn those into opportunities and changes to, you know, to help the shelter instead of letting it harm it. Okay, so what the occupant should expect of their non-congregate shelter experience from entrance to exit, and describe proposed staffing levels. So kind of just all your programming. Program entrance and exit. Now here's one of the bits and pieces to talk about. There is no time limit from HUD on how long someone can stay at the shelter. Okay. So this is a very nuanced area for you all, and so make sure that you just take into consideration how you want to go about it, because I know that several of you are receiving emergency shelter grant funds, and there's definite, you know, pieces around how long someone can stay. Okay, so it really is up to you how you want to do it. A big piece though is just making sure, you know, there's that transitional piece as far as making sure people are moving from better housing experience to better housing experience instead of back into homelessness. So we're going to recommend that as well because we want to see people housed long-term. And I know it's rough because basically this is behavioral support and change that you're doing in shelter. And so I'm going through the program entrance and exit, what that looks like, your termination policies, because we all know things happen. And so termination is sometimes needed. And so everything that you're doing and the rationale behind it, just make sure you go ahead and state that. Okay. And then the housing focus piece. So this housing is a housing first program. And so we do ask that you take that into consideration, that everything is as low barrier as possible. And if you happen to have a barrier of sorts, you need to have a really good explanation as to why it's there. So barriers can look like everything from, let's see, drug testing. That's a big one. So we really like to limit drug testing. Another one is, you know, if they're, you know, what using looks like, so that they, you know, it's okay to have a house rule to not use on site. That's okay. But again, that low barrier piece of, you know, making sure that they're clean when they come in, that's something to, you know, consider maybe taking out of your policies. So do you know the difference, like not drug testing when they come in, but you can also have a house rule that says, you know, you really can't use while you're here. Okay, the two's totally, they're kind of in the same vein, but they're not the same thing at all. Okay. So just again, looking at this, looking at what local coordinated entry is going to look at. If you guys don't have a coordinated entry system where you're at, we have been working with our coordinated, like statewide coordinated entry, to see how we can go ahead and essentially set up that prioritization and the VI SPDAT for your agency that plugs into the statewide system. Okay, so that is also kind of cool that we're working out. And then the maximum length of stay. So, you know, go ahead and state that what you're, you know, thinking about as far as how people transition out of the program, because obviously, you know, you're not creating permanent supportive housing. It is still a shelter. So finding out those nuances between how long they're going to stay, what, you know, what those programmatic requirements are going to look like and how you're going to implement them. Okay, so are there any questions? I feel like I've been talking and explaining a lot, and it may be creating a little bit of confusion. Okay. Well, you know how to access us, so just ask questions. I really recommend you guys start writing this like soon, starting today if possible, so that way if questions do come up, because you have until the 15th of September, which is just a month away. So I highly recommend starting this now. So if you do have questions pop up, you can ask them. Does the organization agency have written procedures to ensure records containing personal identification information of any individual or family applies and or receives HOME-ARP assistance will be kept secure and confidential? So just your policies around that, including those policies for staff members and what that looks like for confidentiality. I know the VAWA having a work requirement considered a barrier. I'll talk about that in a second, Doug. So for confidentiality, I know the VAWA and domestic violence organizations, you do have separate policies around this, very specific, so just let us know. So before I go to funding alignment, program alignment, I'm going to answer the question here. And the question is having a work requirement considered a barrier? It can. Yeah, it can be considered a barrier. Now, I think it just depends on how that kind of plays out. With the shelter, you can't really require payments as far as to live there. You can't have a housing like a lease for their unit. However, you can have house rules that they need to sign, that they understand what the expectation is to be living there. Requiring them to work, HUD is very specific on not requiring programming for individuals who are living in their shelters. So they need to be able to voluntarily participate in that. So I think if you have a work system, if you have them have regular check-ins as to how they're doing, and then also talking about the work requirement, I think it also talks about, you know, it's also easy to get stuck, especially, you know, if you are safe and you have your own location. So we understand that this is a shelter. We want individuals to move to a more permanent location and be able to support themselves. But the work piece may be something to, I guess we would need to know more information about that. So I would put that in the narrative, but it could be considered a barrier, yes, because again, HUD wants to make sure that all programming is voluntary. Okay, so yeah. And it looks like Doug is wanting to tell us some more information.
I was just, so I'll unmute because it'd be
That's
easier.
fine. Yeah, that's fine.
So one of the requirements that we currently have is that when people come into the shelter, they have to be willing and able to work. So part of the house rules are that they job search and find employment, and then further into the program, they have to maintain a certain number of hours, because we're not permanent supportive housing. So there's not, like, we're not, the idea is that you've got to, because of ESG, because we're funded also through ESG, right, there's a 12 week period that we have to serve, to serve folks. And so we want them to be able to leave. And so for that reason, the easiest way is for them to find work. So
absolutely.
We don't make anybody work, but if at a certain point in time you don't have a job, you can't continue to stay. And so I know that that's a barrier for a certain demographic of the population, but as long as that's written into our policies and procedures, is that a scoring issue? I think is probably my questions related to that. Like, we're as housing first friendly as we can be, with the understanding that we're not, the mission of our organization is not permanent supportive housing.
Right. Because it's not a PSH program, and I totally agree. I think that as long as it's clear that they need to find a way to start to get money to move out, I guess that would be a better way. And really, because like you said, it is a shelter. There is a next step piece. Like, you cannot live here forever, because it's a shelter. And so, and I think because ESG 2, and I believe you guys are coordinated, and you're like the coordinated entry main collaborator group. Yes, Doug?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
that's what I thought. So I really think following the policies that have been put in place for ESG and coordinated entry are fine, because it's housing first. We're following what they do. So as long as it's okay with that group, you're going to be fine. It sounds like you already know and you're following what they already had in place. I would also just state, for the, to me, what it sounds like is that you're communicating to them, this is not your final stay. Our goal is to help you, either get gainfully employed in order to live on your own, or help them get some sort of assistance, whether it be Medicaid or, and I'm not even just meaning the health benefits, but also helping them get onto Social Security Disability or SSI, those types of programs, in order to move out and get something a bit more permanent. And so as long as that's clearly communicated that this is not your final destination, we really want to help you move on. How would you like to do that? I think that would be, it sounds like that's how you guys are having those conversations with them. Yes?
Yes, thank you so much. That answers my question.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Okay. Now moving on, this y'all should be able to write in your sleep. Your agency mission. Does the project align with your mission? So just go ahead and go through these programs and these questions. So here's the thing with all of these questions, all of them. Just make sure you read them thoroughly. Please don't assume that this is exactly what this means. As far as I think part of the issue sometimes when completing these questions, all questions can be we're not fully understanding what the answer is that we need to complete, which is why I'm here and talking to y'all. So just make sure you read through these, and if you're unsure, just like what Doug was talking about with Housing First and those pieces, just ask us, let us know so that way we can clarify if needed. Does the non-congregate shelter match with your mission? Is your agency the local leader in your service area, both geographically and with the population you'll be serving? Oh my gosh, it's 1:45. Okay. What are your nonprofit core competencies to serve the area? Are you a local leader? So just really given your relationship of your agency to the community, to have close relationships within the community, your top 3 interagency relationships, which is really good, who you're partnering with. If you're not a community service board, are you partnering with your community service board? Are you partnering with your local community action agency? Are you close with your DFACS agency? All these different programs, are you working with them? Are you developing them? Public housing, are you working with public housing? What does that look like? And it doesn't just need to be 3. If you're working with 10 and you want to talk about everything you're doing with all of them, that's fine. But don't also put extra things just because you have to remember, we have to read all of these. So just really do the big highlights that are really important to your agency. Do they usually fund your type of program? As far as the interagency relationships, are you in their geographic area? So is this an agency that's even out of state? Is this, how is it relevant? You're going to have to show that they know the local needs like you, that you both are working together to meet those local needs. Are you asking for the right amount of money as far as with these agencies? So are you asking, do you need to be asking for more money or less money if you're working with an agency that's helping fund, if you need more assistance? So for example, if you're working with a community service board and you're getting a certain amount of assistance from their counseling department, you may need more counseling. You may need to ask for more. And you're figuring that out. Maybe you need to start partnering with another counseling agency in order to make sure that you're able to get enough counseling for the people who are in your program. So those types of questions. And then if there are no development plans, what is the timeline to start building within 12 months? So if you're not sure about that piece yet, if you get funded, the non-congregate shelter funds from HOME-ARP, what steps are you going to take in order to start building in 2024? Okay. Lastly, does the organization have a drug-free workplace policy? And then conflict of interest. Does the organization have written standards of code of conduct cover conflicts of interest and organizational conflicts of interest? Okay. Okay. So before I leave this page, are there any other questions? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move on to the logic model. It's the next tab. Now, I broke these down. This is not a requirement that you have to complete for the non-congregate shelter. However, in the nonprofit community, it is a very regular thing that a lot of different groups request, but mainly the reason we like it, particularly me, is it helps you get to the impact. Like where this is really, to me, this is the most important section. How do you want to impact your area? What are the long-term results of your efforts? Okay, and so you look at the data SWOT, you look at everything that you've got going on, and where do you want to lead it to be? And essentially what this does is it helps you clarify what you're doing. Instead of just having it be activities you're doing, you're actually looking at the impact that you want to make. Okay, so since we have about 10 minutes left, I want to make sure I hit a few more things. I may come back to this if we have some extra time, but again, this is not scored. Logic models can be a little confusing too. I tried to create enough explanations in this so then that way you could kind of use it to be clear on what's needed, because sometimes even outputs and outcomes are very confusing. So the output is the actual number of what you want as far as who's participating, and the outcomes, you'll actually, it's the immediate effect of the participation. So like it says here, less disruption in the classroom from children and higher grades and participation. So essentially what it is you're taking those data points that you have that you were looking at initially. You're putting those data points through your program, and in the end, you're going to have the outcomes and impacts to change your community. Okay, so we're actually putting all of this process through the data points, quotes, not really machine, but that's the only thing I could think of right now. And then you really want to start looking at the impact. So guys, this is your time to kind of start taking your dreams and putting them into reality. Like, what do we want to do? Like for, I know we've been talking a lot with Doug today, which has been great. So a homeless shelter up in Cartersville, you want to have homelessness. The impact would be to decrease homelessness by 10% in the next 5 years, or, be able to have, to bring unemployment down by so much, because you're able to bring qualified workers because you're doing a lot of work program or more. I guess that wouldn't necessarily affect unemployment. That's a whole other system, but you know what I mean? So trying to look at all those different numbers and how it's going to impact from your program in your area, okay? So that's what this sheet is supposed, it's again, another sheet like this SWOT to help you clarify what you want to do with a non-congregate shelter. And if you want to apply it to your whole program, that's great. Like I said, you don't have to submit this. You guys can use all of these things in other parts of your programming, not just for non-congregate shelter. And then finally, the scoring sheet. So the reason I wanted to hit this one is because there are some areas that are kind of threshold oriented things that I really want to make sure you guys are paying attention to. One is the program entrance and exit piece. That termination policy is really important. It's a part of threshold, so please make sure you concentrate on that. Your waitlist management, okay, and how people will be entered into your program. So we, wondering if we have that. We didn't put that there. So just making sure that you have like your waitlist overview and what that looks like, okay? And I think we actually had a waitlist mentioned in another part of the application. I'm gonna have to check that out. Program funding and alignment. So just making sure that all of the pieces of your agency are aligning to the non-congregate shelter. And again, all of you pretty much have shelters to begin with. So yes, I get that they align, but this is looking at your mission statement. Your non-congregate shelter aligns with your project, if the conflicts of interest policy is important. And then there's also your board of directors signs an ethics and conflict of interest statement. So these are all important pieces to have when you apply. So make sure you take a look at those. Again, those are the ones in the blue. That means that they're threshold and super important, okay? We're at 153. Okay, so we went through all of these. This was all in the sheet. I just copied it over. So, oh, I forgot to take those out. So takeaways, read each question and make sure that you understand that question. If you have any questions about the question, please reach out to us and let us know so that way we can clarify it for you. Answer each question thoroughly and clearly and have several people read it. The reason I say that is because sometimes it may make sense to you, but it may not make sense to someone else. So having another 2 or 3 eyes on it is really important. So that's again why I recommend please start writing it now so you can have someone or 2 someones or 3 someones reread it before the 15th. And then that way it's super clear, okay? And again, just thorough and clear. More words aren't necessarily better. Just got to say that. Sometimes clarity comes in just 2 or 3 words that are very well chosen. So please know that more is not necessarily better, but we also want you to have enough room to state everything that you need. So again, use these documents as a jumping off point. So this may be something that you keep and put to the side for future programs as well. So you can write your great big long piece to plug into other grants, and then you just chop it up to what you need, okay? So that may be part of it too. Do not assume that DCA knows what you're explaining. Limit acronyms and organizational specific language. So it looks like we're probably going to have people reading this from lots of different parts of DCA. So maybe someone who's not involved with ESG or not involved with the Housing First piece as much may not fully understand what that means. So you may need to explain why your program is Housing First, that you're not you're not requiring them to do this or this or this or this. And so, or, there is absolutely no requirements for them to stay in your shelter, and therefore it is Housing First. So going through all those steps, just to make sure that you're very clear in your explanations, and just know that the people reading it may or may not understand what you're saying from a programmatic standpoint. They may not be coming from that camp, so just be aware of that. Use a logic model to get clear on your final goals and how to get there. Again, that input piece is super important. And so be sure that you take a look at, not input, what am I saying? Your impact piece is essentially what you really want to do in the end, and how you want to impact your area and how your agency really transforms the area as much as possible. And so it's not just with a non-congregate shelter. What do you guys want to do big picture as an agency for the area? And lastly, because there aren't 3 other points, and I was thinking, I was like, we have lots more, and I just forgot. Ask questions. It helps everyone in the process. So go to our form site, go ahead and ask questions there. We'll post them to the site. I've tried to be better at keeping up with those. We've updated it. There's like 20 of them on there now. I will probably add Doug's 2 questions here, or 1 question, I should say. And so please ask more questions if you have them, because you can be the teacher in the moment for everyone. So we have all of this information, and then 3 of us. So if you guys have any other questions, let us know. I'm going to put myself on pause for the next 3 minutes. What questions do you guys have? Is there any other pieces that you need from us? And by the way, just one other thing, actually, before we turn it over to more questions, and it looks like Tiffany may have one, is that next week we're going to have a chance to go through all the applications a bit thoroughly and see what we have and don't have and things like that from all the submissions, and not start really the formal review, but kind of just do an initial insight, and then we're going to offer feedback next week during this training that talks about kind of what we're missing on the most part, what we have for the most part. So then that way you guys know what gaps to fill for the September 15th. Okay, so just know that that's next week. Okay, Tiffany, do you have a question, or oh, nope, you're still on mute. You just happened to come up as unmuting, and you weren't. It's just me. Does anyone else have a question, thoughts, concerns, challenges, additional submission feedback? Yvonne, yes.
So next week, it'd be nice if you told us specifically what we were missing. Is that what you're saying, or are you just going to do it vaguely?
We're going to do it a little bit vaguely. However, let's just say it this way. At this point, it'll be vague, but we're going to figure out a way to make it more specific.
Okay.
To each of you, but I don't feel comfortable, for obvious reasons. I don't feel comfortable doing it in a big group. Yes. But I think I'm going to propose something to my HOME-ARP colleagues of what we can do for the application that may help you all out. So, and by the way, guys, we received 8 submissions, which is great. And we were super excited about that. My goal was somewhere between 5 and 10, so that's what we got. So, so we're super excited about that. And a lot of different suggestions as far as even number of units that people are asking for and organizations are asking for. So, so essentially, I'm going to go off sharing. So yes, so Yvonne, to answer your question in a way long ways, next week it'll just be vague. You know, this is what we were seeing as a trend. We'll tell you the trends, and then we'll also be talking about more specific details, potentially the future. I don't know if it'll be written or another means, but we'll definitely get you guys feedback. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate
it. Absolutely. Yeah, no problem. No, this is a learning time. Again, we hope that this is contributing at least a little bit to your organization, that it's helping from the feedback we've gotten. Yes, it can be a little clunky at times. I'm not going to, it's all kind of new for us as far as doing it all this way. But we also wanted to make sure that you guys had some additional good stuff in your arsenal to take with you post non-congregate shelter into the rental housing, HOME-ARP, and into the future. So, but it's at 2 o'clock. If you guys have any further questions, we can stay on for a little bit later if you guys have any questions, but I don't think you do, because no one's been unmuting other than Yvonne at this last time. So we'll talk to you guys next Thursday. This will be posted to the website probably within 24 hours, and then definitely leave us information on the forms online form or at homearp.dca.ga.gov if you have any other questions. Okay, so you guys are awesome. We're so grateful for you, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.